And hello, C3. Thank you so much for joining us for today's panel on how to adapt SEO to consumer evolution with agility. So today I have some amazing panelists with me. I'm incredibly excited to share the digital stage with Matt Osuch, VP of SEO at Getty and iStock Photos, Scott Messina, Director of Search and Design Strategy at Samsung, and last but not least, Kara Lombardo, Manager of SEO at Dick's Sporting Goods. I'm Stefan Bajayo. I'm Chief Evangelist and Co-Founder at Conductor, and I'm very excited to have you guys all here. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thanks for having us, Stefan.
Happy to have you.
Great. So, what do you say we get into it? Let's start talking about. I guess I wonder how long I'm allowed to say it's been a crazy year. Are we too far in that we're allowed to say that, or do we get like a pass for 2020, like the whole year 2021? We get to say it's been a crazy year, irrespective, right? We all agree on that.
Ongoing.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Cool. So that said, let's dare I bring us back for a moment, but let's think about how have you seen consumer behavior change over this past year? Who wants to jump in first? Let's get into what have you guys fundamentally seen within your businesses?
I can jump in first. I think the biggest one for us has really been kind of the evolution of customer expectations. So I feel like this past year really shined a light on how flexible kind of retailers can be. And so it raised the bar on the customer experience. I think the consumers are really accustomed now to having all of their needs met and really quickly. I think that they expect retailers to be able to anticipate how they want to shop, right? From curbside pickup to item availability notifications and even beyond. I think, if they're not finding what they're looking for, they'll certainly be able to find it elsewhere. So I think just kind of that flexibility has been a huge one over the past year.
I think the biggest thing that stands out to me is what the effect that all the shutdowns had. So from our perspective at Samsung, from a customer care point of view, there's a lot of things you just couldn't do. You couldn't get a technician to come to your house. You couldn't walk into a location and get your cracked screen fixed. So I think while we had all these digital solutions all lined up prior to all of the quarantines kicking in, after it happened, we just had to be like a rocket ship and be ready for people to mail their phones in, for people to get a technician to come to their house, but follow all the right policies and wear masks and booties and all those things. So from a behavior perspective, people still needed all their stuff fixed, but we just had to adjust in terms of how we met the customer where they are.
Great point.
Yeah, we had a weird go around, of course, like everybody else in the lockdown times. But we are predominantly at iStock and Getty, digitally based. We're internet based already. There's not too much that you can do with us in person. There may have been a gallery at some point years ago, but nobody was visiting art galleries, right? So what we saw was certainly a pivot to some of our digital assets that we didn't expect off seasonality completely. And we service customer types that use things for advertising, for entertainment, for sport, or for other purposes. And all those things got shut down. So demand really fluctuated wildly. And being an international business, we saw the different rollouts of lockdowns roll through to the different countries as well. So we had to be prepared to really pivot against the type of lockdown that was happening. We understand the content in need, and the content that we were providing needed to look consistent with the real world. You couldn't have pictures of doctors and nurses or even people walking around without masks on anymore. And so we pivoted a lot in our visual aspect of all of our content to get our content creators and imagery to have the new real world, the new reality. That was something that really had to pivot.
That makes complete sense. And you all bring up very, very valid and timely points, right? Which leads to a change in need equals either a demise for some companies, unfortunately, and I hate to use that term, but it's true. Many companies did not make it through this process, but those that did also evolved, right? And in that evolution came an opportunity. With the storm came a silver lining, and that silver lining may have been the speed to digital transformation, the speed to pivoting and agility. And I think that's really what we're here to talk about today. So how did your teams, and you started getting into that, Matt, so I think let's expound on that a little bit as a group. How did your team's content strategies evolve to meet that evolving need of your customer? So in Matt's case, yes, I understand we're putting masks on our imagery. We're changing that, which I think, Matt, I'd love to later hear your thoughts on, like, how do you even do that? Like, how do you get people to take photos that way? Like, I don't even understand how that works. But I mean, Scott, you're on the side of the already having consumed the product, customer success kind of fulfillment on that end, and delight and fulfillment on that end. How do you change your content to meet the need of a frustrated consumer?
I really think nothing fundamentally changed for us in terms of meeting demand. A big part of our business is we don't generate demand. We don't go after it. The demand generates itself, right? If your phone stops working, if your TV is cracked, if your fridge isn't cold enough, right? That's demand that generates itself, and then you go out there and you look for an answer. So from our perspective, if someone's Samsung product isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing, and their first step often is going to Google, we just want to be the voice that's capable of answering that question. So I think we were always doing that. That was our same approach 2 years ago. What really kicked in and started being more aggressive come March of last year was just the volume of these questions. And I think the cause and effect was not that because you're locked inside all day, you're not going to use your products. You're still using your TV and your fridge and your phone. You're just using it more frequently. So the fact that the usage hours went way up means the likelihood that you're going to run into a problem or want to know how to use a feature or something like that really increased. So we just had to get better and quicker in terms of looking for those signals of where there's unmet demand, writing content, and getting it live.
Wow. Kara, how about yourself? How did you meet that, I mean, Dick's Sporting Goods, right? If people aren't going out and playing, what do we do?
Yeah, I was really excited about this question because I really felt like our team did such an awesome job of pivoting and adapting really quickly to changing customer demand. So, last year we didn't see the kind of queries like how to break in a baseball glove because kids weren't playing team sports, right? But what we did see that was so awesome was, how to choose the right kayak for me. What size bike do I need? Golf clubs for beginners, right? All of these activities that can be done in isolation and socially distanced, and people were just hungry for learning new things, and they really wanted to consume content that would teach them how to do it. And so we were so grateful to have Searchlight to be able to help us uncover these huge opportunities for new content. We saw huge spikes in home workouts, right? You saw all the commercials of people working out in their homes, and Dick's Sporting Goods was able to quickly meet that demand. And so really just like throwing the content calendar out the window and listening to our athletes and saying, this is what the athlete needs right now. Let's make sure that we can meet that demand for them.
That's amazing. I love that. So Matt, how do you convince a bunch of people to take photos with masks on? How does this work?
Well, luckily, we've got over 250 million images that have been backlogged over the last 25 years of the Getty Images and iStock portfolios of imagery. There were already a significant amount of medically based, pictures, but not in every context and setting. So we're lucky enough to have such a broad contributor base and a call out to that contributor base to ask them. They were already seeing the trends in their home environments, that people were masking up, that people were what is the term social distancing? We didn't know that word in January and February of last year, and now it is one of the most prominent words in our lexicon of terminology of if someone is socially distancing or not. So we had a rapid call out to contributors. The contributors were already uploading known information, and we had to pivot our existing top priority categories and into showing search results that had those type of imagery in them. From the algorithms that we have set up for if you think of Getty and iStock as a search engine for images, it already was starting to float to the top, but we needed more recent imagery as well. It was really interesting to see, and you can see on Google Trends how the spikes changed over time where people couldn't shoot their own video anymore, their own custom video. They couldn't have video studios set up. So video was also increasing last year as well, and we had to meet that demand.
That's interesting.
And credit to you guys for what you offer, because I saw no shortage of poorly photoshopped masks on people. So those are surely in demand.
Yeah, it's not what Disney does. I think they Photoshop masks onto people on the ride images. It's not like that. We actually have real photography from our photographers around the world that are shooting with masks and taking the right preparations. Even during the whole Black Lives Matter movements, all the rallies and the protests and everything else that went on last year in the political realm, we had to make sure that our own contributors were in good standing with their personal health, their well-being, where they're going, so they could shoot that imagery and that material.
That's amazing. You know what? You know what's so wonderful about all of what you all have said so far is it's given us a window into your own businesses. It's given us a window into, as a marketer, I feel for Scott's, all of a sudden uptick in, oh my God, more people are using our products more frequently, and the do-it-yourself solution versus calling the technician is now at your disposal. And Matt, I feel for you with regards to, where are we going to find pictures with masks? Everything with masks, right? And Kara, this whole idea that, you have to pivot on a dime and think, okay, I was in love with that content calendar, but game over. We now have to really think about the new world and also think, what is it that we provide that maps back to the condition of what can be done, right? Can I go and play golf? Can I go and kayak? Can I go and do these things? It's very interesting to think that all three of your businesses did a phenomenal job based on what you're saying in actually meeting the need of the consumer. So that said, how do you think your channel mix changed? Like, did the approach of what we consider, and all three of your organizations are very digital forward, I will say. So I don't believe you are, I would not characterize either one of your companies as a needing a huge amount of digital transformation within them. That's not to say they're perfect. I think no one would say their own company is perfect. But that said, what happened with maybe search specifically, and then the channel mix? How was marketing changed in your organization due to changes that were put upon all of us?
So I think for us, the biggest thing wasn't necessarily a change, but it was an openness to test more. So I think that COVID really challenged these strong beliefs that we had held previously about how we should do things in search and in social and all of these different marketing channels. And when COVID hit, we kind of pulled back on all of that and said, this might be a great time to test turning off paid search and seeing what organic search can do, right? Or, test spending less in certain areas and more in others, depending on kind of like the climate. And so I would say for us, it was really just taking a lot of this opportunity and running with it for testing. And I think that my big hope is that we'll take that into 2021 and beyond, of just saying, let's really look at these things with an open mind, as opposed to saying, this is how we've always done it and this is how we should do it. So I think that was the biggest one for us.
That's huge. I love that. With a crisis comes an opportunity, right? And that opportunity it was wonderful that your organization, while feeling the pinch, I'm sure financially, was still willing to consider tests and growth, as opposed to just saying we have to batten down the hatches and keep it this way, which I think some companies probably did, and I think they didn't learn half as much as you guys probably did.
Absolutely. Yep.
I think on our end, from a customer care perspective, we're used to being sort of bottom of the totem pole, last consideration, things like that, right? Generally, the marketing org is focusing on selling the product. We're focusing on after the product has been purchased, and there's this want for collaboration in between. And I don't know if I could credit COVID with it specifically, but I've been pretty optimistic. Coming up on 5 years at Samsung, over this past year, I've seen more signals of marketing and e-commerce and care all collaborating and working together than I ever had before. And I think that's really good for us to see, because the way customer care we'd like to be framed is, first of all, when you need us, we're here and we'll have an answer. But second of all, one of the reasons you should buy one of our products is because we're awesome in customer care, right? And we'll answer all your questions. And if anything happens, we got you covered. And I think I've seen a lot of positive signs coming from the marketing org that we're willing to fold you guys into our key messages. We're willing to talk about care in the context of this is why you should buy our phone. And I think, part of this COVID model, and we're all working remotely, that may be a part of it. They may have forced our various orgs together and start working up with common solutions.
Yeah, it's funny. I've actually been saying out in the marketplace a lot that I thought 2020 was the year of LTV, so lifetime value, and understanding that your consumer post-acquisition is just as important as the pre-acquisition consumer, because in a world where people have less disposable income but just as many options, and everyone's fighting over taking some share from someone else, let's face it, because you already know it's an established consumer, let me grab them. The idea that we would just say that's the FAQ section, is an antiquated model when it comes to thinking about your consumer, right? We know that I'm sure someone that shops at Dick's doesn't just shop once, right? You use Getty, you're not just going to get one image. You're going to come back and utilize that. And if you're buying Samsung, you're probably going to be buying a multitude of different products and potentially upgrades of those products. So you clearly want to have that relationship with the consumer. And I think, I hate to say COVID might have smacked a lot of companies in the face to figure that out, but I think it definitely did. So that said, how are you guys preparing the next chapter? So if we think about reopening, and we think about, and while I know reopening will mean something different to Dick's than it will to Getty, for example, what does reopening mean to you? What is changing in regards to the next chapter? How do you carry the lessons, Kara, of the testing and so forth into 2021?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so what I really hope that we do is that we continue to have this mindset of openness when it comes to things, like I said earlier, kind of throwing the content calendar out the window and listening to our athletes when they tell us, what they're looking for when it comes to something like I said, these really educational queries like the best kayak for me, or what size bike does my kid need, because everybody wants to get outside and they're losing their minds in the house. We want to make sure that we can just kind of continue to listen to the athlete and not just do things the way we've always done them. And I think that really just goes hand in hand with, the way that we've done things this past year. So just kind of building on all of that is going to be the biggest one for us, for sure.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, Kara. And it's interesting to think about it now that I step back and listen to you guys talk about how you're approaching some of these questions. You guys are my potential customers. Getty and iStock are more focused toward a B2B, SMB, enterprise experience and purchaser rather than a consumer. You guys have to think about your consumer messaging, your consumer imagery, your consumer content. And I think about it slightly differently, where I have to plan my editorial calendar earlier because I have to get out in front of individuals that are the marketers, that are creating the marketing materials that you're going to put out to your consumers to then make the purchases to those products. For us at Getty and iStock, we've been focusing on diversity and inclusion, not just around the pandemic, but across all the other things that have happened last year. There was so much more that happened than just the pandemic, fortunately and unfortunately. The Black Lives Matter movement, the racial inequality movements, and the political movements that occurred last year into this year. And so we're trying to create a landscape of imagery that prepares everyone for those diversity conversations, that inclusion conversation, the materials that are ready for everyone in 2021 and 22. And do we still set a prominence on imagery with masks or not, and social distancing or not? And how do we honor all of those things we learned in the last year to move forward into next year?
Great point.
And I know I'm particularly fascinated, Matt, to see what array of things that are normal right now are going to be normal 2 years from now, right? Is it that we, just like a bunch of other countries, will start to treat masks as normal? I have no idea, but I'm really excited to see what comes. I think from a Samsung perspective, like, what do I need to carry forward that we've learned over this past year? What I hope we carry through is the concept of speed. So, Stefan, you talked about agility, and like that's really what we're talking about right now. I see agility as being a combination of speed and the ability to change at a moment's notice, but speed specifically in our ability to conceive an idea and then get it live in front of customers. I think that with a company as big as Samsung, I probably always want to move faster than we're capable of moving. But I've seen an increase in our ability to move quickly over the past year. And I'm hoping if, as we emerge from this, that sort of gets baked into our culture and we start moving more quickly. Like, I know for me personally, I prefer begging for forgiveness rather than asking for permission. And I've been just doing that more frequently over the past year. And I hope conceptually that becomes the norm. And people who want to move more quickly, people who want to get solutions out in front of our customers, whether it's content or new processes or new ideas, we could just do that more quickly. Yes, we could do it with agility, but also we could just move faster.
That's a great point. So I'm throwing the last one out the window. The last question or my final question, well, I get veto, so I'm going to veto that. And as much as I want to talk about where you guys are going to place your bets, which if you want to work that into the answers, that's fine as well. But I really want to think about what makes agility happen at your organization. Like, how do you guys make things move faster? What is the way? Give an example if you can to help everyone who's watching, who's going like, that's great, but that's Samsung. And someone else is saying, well, that's Dick's Sporting Goods and that's Getty, so they're bigger than I am. And they probably have teams of hundreds of people that help them. False. And they're all working really hard because I know them well enough to know they all don't have hundreds of people that are simply helping them with their initiatives, especially not in search. They may have to influence them, but they don't have them all at their disposal. For you guys, what makes fast? What makes agile? What makes what you just threw your content calendar out the window, Kara? How in the world do you get your team together and rally and say, from now on, if we want to move on something, we can. Golf is the thing. We change to golf. Golf is next, or kayak is next. How do you do that?
Yeah, I love this question because it can be really difficult sometimes to get leadership on board about something when you're really passionate and you know that it's going to have great return and you just can't seem to convince them. And I think with COVID, it was interesting because it just was kind of the logical choice to say, like, we can see the demand here. There's proof. If we can get ranking and get the click-through rate here, we're going to drive a ton of traffic to the site, right? It was just kind of common sense. It's not always going to be like that, right? There are going to be times where you're going to have to really push harder and prove that what you're championing for is really going to drive results. And so I would say the best advice I can give is do it slowly once and bring the results to the table and say, hey, look how well this worked. Here's how long it took me. Here's how long it should take me, right? And so next time, you can get everyone on board to say, wow, we're moving really slow on something that's driving results like this. We need to get behind these people and make sure that we're giving them the resources that they need and everything else to kind of just make sure that we can get behind these initiatives that are going to drive results for the company. And hopefully, you'll get the support you need. But that's my best piece of advice is do it slowly once and show people, right, the results.
And I think distilled in all that, Kara, is try it. Just do it, right? Like, just try it. The biggest thing I think is frustrating for a lot of SEOs is the pace at which Google shows results. So I can go live with a web page right now. And what I usually tell people is you got to wait 6 to 8 weeks to even get a sense for whether it's working, right? Like, you don't know if the clicks are there. You don't know if the demand is there. Sometimes you have to sit back and wait. And what I would say is the longer you wait to try the thing you're considering, the longer you have to wait for that 6 to 8 weeks. And if it didn't quite work out, you got to make a change then, wait another couple weeks to see if that works. So the longer you wait to start that timeline of waiting for Google to do its thing, the longer you're going to be sitting there wondering whether it works or not, when really you could have just done a test, tried it, pushed it live, see if it works.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Kara and Scott. And at the risk of repeating exactly what they're talking about, because they're both right on track, I'm going to go off script then too. I've been telling my team, again, just a moderate-sized team, two other SEO strategists, a data scientist, but I've been fortunate enough to have developers dedicated to the SEO track, but that happened before I got in. So there was buy-in from the C-suite level, from the CMO, the CTO, that the SEO track needed to have dedicated development resources, so we don't have to battle with product. We don't have to battle with anybody else to get the things we want done. But other than that, I'm going to say beg, borrow, steal is a typical perspective I like to have for my SEO teams, to say that if something broke on somebody else's part of the site, or if something else is somebody else's ownership, but they got it wrong for SEO, go make them fix it. Don't make our team fix it. Go make them fix it and show the data, show the numbers, do some comparative analysis against competitors in the industry on, well, the guy that's in position number 1, 2, and 3 did it this way. They got it right, and look where they're at. They're getting this amount of estimated traffic or this amount of return on their investment. And that's the kind of thing we need to see. Going back to the numbers, driving revenue or orders is also something we all know is very important, and having those models built out so that when you estimate that traffic and the click-through rate and you have it ready to go to show to the next person that needs to approve that work, it's going to make you all the more successful, and that's what I've found. So my little tip is be greedy, beg, borrow, steal, try and get others to do what you can't get to do, get them on board with your messaging on how great it's going to go.
I think there's some great lessons here from everyone. I appreciate all of you guys. This is a really, I mean, I wish we could go for another God knows how long, because I think there's so much we could dig into in each one of your situations. Hopefully everyone will be inspired to do this themselves in their own organizations as well. So hopefully reach out to you guys via LinkedIn or whatever the social medium of choice is, have those conversations, ask you how you're doing it, and really figure out how they can evolve and move the agility within their own companies. Thank you all so much for your time. Thanks everyone for joining us, and looking forward to the next session.
This was fun. Thank you.